There comes a time in every soul's journey when the weight of the past presses in so heavily that the future seems dim, distant, perhaps even unreachable. We measure our days by the failures we remember, the wounds we've carried, the dreams we quietly buried beneath layers of resignation. The narrative of our life feels written in ink too dark to change, etched by the hands of regret and lost time. But what if that is not the end of the story? What if the author of all things has picked up his pen again? Too often we assume that our story is settled, that because certain chapters have unfolded in sorrow, the rest must inevitably follow suit. But the one who breathed stars into being is not limited by the pages already turned. He is not bound by the twists and turns that have left us weary. No, he is a God who rewrites, not with denial but with redemption, not by erasing the past but by transforming its purpose. To trust the process is to trust the author. It is to believe that the same hands that allowed the breaking are now preparing the mending. It is to surrender the pen we've so desperately clutched, convinced that control would spare us pain, only to discover that control often leads us further from joy. There is a holy courage required to say, I do not understand, but I will trust. For it is in this surrender that God begins his most magnificent work, not from a place of ease, but from the ashes of what we thought was over. We often long for a rewritten story that begins with comfort, but comfort rarely leads to transformation. The greatest stories are born in tension, refined in silence and completed in grace. God is not hurried, nor does he work in the lines we would have chosen. But his timing is never cruel. It is perfect. And while we wait, while we ache, while we wonder if anything good can come from this mess of a life, he is at work behind the scenes, preparing a beauty we could not script ourselves. So do not despise your place in the process. Do not mourn the ink that has already dried. For the greatest miracle may not be in changing your circumstances, but in changing you, in making your heart whole, your spirit resilient, your faith unshakable. And when the new chapter begins, it will not erase what came before. It will give it meaning. The story is not finished. The pain is not wasted, and the pen is not in your hands. It rests in the grasp of one who knows how to bring glory out of grief, healing out of heartbreak, and purpose out of pain. Trust the process, for God is about to rewrite your story in a way only he can. There is a peculiar comfort in the familiar, even when the familiar is sorrowful. We wrap ourselves in the garments of our past like a worn coat, not because it warms us, but because it reminds us of who we think we are. Our mistakes, our regrets, the moments we fell short or lost our way, they become the ink with which we write the story of ourselves. And over time, we begin to believe that these chapters are final, that our failures are fixed points in the plot, and that nothing more can be said. But how utterly untrue that is. For the story you have accepted as finished is in the hands of the divine still unfolding, and before he can begin to write a new chapter, he must first ask you to let go of the one you've been clinging to. Not to forget it, not to erase it, but to release it into his hands for redemptive work. The letting go is not forgetting, it is trusting. It is the brave act of placing your wounds, your shame, and your broken pieces into the care of one who does not despise your story, but delights in transforming it. This is no easy surrender. There is grief in it. There is resistance. For even the most painful identity can become an anchor when you have known nothing else. When the soul has grown used to defining itself by what has gone wrong, it becomes suspicious of what could go right. We fear disappointment more than we hope for change. We become theologians of limitation, declaring, "This is just the way I am," instead of disciples of grace, whispering, "But God is not done." Yet the truth remains, however buried it may be. He is not done. The narrative you have accepted as your destiny is merely the setting. It is not the plot. It is not the ending. It is not the truth. God is not interested in whitewashing your past. He is interested in redeeming it. He is not merely writing over your pain. He is writing through it. And if you would only place the old narrative on the altar, he would take it, bless it, break it, and multiply it into something beyond your imagining. Letting go means allowing God to speak a new identity over you, not one rooted in your worst day, but in his eternal vision for your life. You are not your mistakes. You are not the sum of your missed opportunities or your shattered dreams. You are a character in a divine drama, and the author has not lost his. Even now, he is drawing you out of the margins, back into the center of the story he has been writing from the beginning of time. The past is not a prison unless you decide to keep the key. Letting go of your old narrative means giving that key back to God and saying, "You lead now." It means trusting that his version of your story will be richer, deeper, more redemptive than anything you could imagine or manufacture. It means embracing the possibility that the best part of your story has not yet been written. This act of surrender is not passive. It is an active rebellion against despair. It is a declaration that hope is not naive, that healing is possible, that the author of your soul has more to say, and when you finally release your grip on what was, your hands are freed to receive what is coming. The old narrative cannot follow you into the promised land. It must be buried in the wilderness so that resurrection may come. And it will, for the God who calls you to let go is the same one who holds all things together, including the scattered pages of your life. The wilderness is not the place we choose. It is not the destination we dream of when we chart the course for our lives. It is a barren land, a place where the noise of life fades into silence, and we are left alone with our thoughts, our doubts, and our fears. It is in the wilderness that we feel most abandoned, most forsaken, and yet it is there that God is doing some of his most vital work. In our modern world, we crave convenience, comfort, and certainty. We want the path to be clear, the steps to be easy, and the outcome to be assured. And when things don't go according to our carefully drawn plans, we feel betrayed. We believe that the wilderness, that season of apparent emptiness, must be a sign that we are lost, that God has somehow forgotten us. But in truth, the wilderness is never the end. It is always the beginning of something new, something deeper. Consider the seasons of your life when you were in the wilderness, when you felt you were wandering without purpose, without direction. Perhaps it was a time of failure or loss or waiting. Perhaps it was a time when you thought that your prayers went unheard, that your efforts were wasted, and that the promise of a breakthrough was nothing more than an illusion. Yet, if you look back, you will see that the wilderness was not a detour from God's plan. It was part of it. In the wilderness, God does not abandon us. Rather, he prepares us. He strips away our illusions of self-sufficiency, our reliance on comfort, and our need for control. He teaches us to depend on him in ways we never would have in the security of the ordinary. The wilderness is not a place of destruction, but of transformation. It is there that the seed of new life is planted in the soil of our soul, and although it may feel like nothing is happening on the surface, below God is at work, tending the roots that will one day bring forth fruit. It is in the wilderness that we learn to trust God not for what we can see, but for who he is. We learn to cling to his character rather than his provisions. We begin to understand that his presence, not his promises, is our true inheritance. It is in the wilderness that we discover that God is enough, even when nothing else is. And so, though the wilderness may seem like a place of delay or abandonment, it is in fact the fertile ground of growth. The wilderness does not signify the end of God's plan. It marks the beginning of a deeper, more intimate relationship with him. It is in the wilderness that we are shaped and molded into the people we are meant to be. The pain we feel there is not punishment, but preparation. The waiting is not pointless. It is part of God's perfect timing. It is easy to believe that we are wasting time when we are in the wilderness. It is easy to believe that the journey has gone off course, but God does not waste anything. Every moment in the wilderness is a moment of preparation for something greater. Every tear, every struggle, every unanswered prayer is part of the process. The wilderness is not the end of the road. It is where the road to your breakthrough begins. To live as a character in a great narrative, one must trust the hand that writes it. Too often, we find ourselves living as if we are the authors of our own lives, convinced that the chapters should unfold as we dictate. We plan, we strive, we struggle, and when things don't go according to our plans, we feel as though the story has gone awry. But the truth is that the author of your life is not only with you in the present moment, he sees the entirety of the narrative, from the first page to the last. We are creatures bound by time. Our vision is limited to the moment before us. We see the difficulty, the trial, the unanswered prayer, and we assume that the story is broken, that it will end in defeat. We judge the book by its current chapter, failing to see that every chapter has its place. But the one who holds the pen sees the story in its entirety. He is not surprised by the plot twists, the painful scenes, or the detours we take. He knows the end and is a good end. The truth is that God is not merely the writer of your story, He is the author of it. And this difference is critical. A writer may create a story, but an author has the power to shape it, to breathe life into it, and to bring meaning to every event that transpires. An author holds the rights to the entire narrative. He understands the purpose of every scene, the significance of every character, and the ultimate goal of every chapter. When we place our trust in the author, we are not simply trusting that the events of our lives will be pleasant or comfortable. We are trusting that he is weaving a story with meaning, purpose, and beauty, one that we may not fully understand, but one that is unfolding perfectly, even when we cannot see it. How often do we want to skip ahead to the final chapter to know how the story will end? How often do we fret over the twists and turns of the plot, believing that because we do not know the ending, the story is somehow failing? But the author is not concerned with our limited understanding of the plot. He is concerned with our trust in his wisdom. He knows that the journey, the winding road with all its obstacles, the battles fought, the lessons learned, is just as vital as the destination. In fact, the end of the story is not the climax we imagine. It is the revelation that every part of the narrative was purposeful. Every pain, every triumph, every moment of despair, each one will be revealed in its fullness at the appointed time. And we will look back and see that it was all part of a greater story, a story of redemption, growth, and glory. We must ask ourselves, do we trust the author enough to surrender the pages we can't yet read? Do we trust him enough to let him write what we cannot imagine, to lead us where we cannot see? It is in this surrender, in this trust, that the beauty of his story begins to unfold. The pain we experience now is not the end. It is part of the process. The disappointments we face are not permanent markers on our story. They are the crucible in which our character is refined. And the moments of joy, the triumphs, are not the full reward. They are glimpses of what is to come. The full reward is the completion of the story, the final chapter, when all will be made right. And so we must rest in the truth that the author knows the end. He is not only with us in our moments of pain, but he is the one who will bring them to their perfect conclusion. A story redeemed is a story that has been through the fire and come out not only unscathed, but stronger, richer, and more beautiful. It is not a tale of uninterrupted success or easy victories, but one of triumph through trial, of light emerging from darkness. A redeemed story is a testimony to the work of God in a life, and it is the kind of story that draws others in, inspiring them to believe that if God can rewrite a life like yours, he can do the same for them. When we are in the midst of our struggles, when the ink of our current chapter seems to be drenched in sorrow, we cannot see the beauty that will emerge from the process. We cannot imagine how God might take our brokenness and turn it into something extraordinary. But as the story unfolds, we begin to see the redemptive work of God in ways that only time and trust can reveal. Consider the characters you most admire, the ones whose stories speak to your heart. These are not people who have lived perfect, problem-free lives. Rather, they are those who have faced incredible challenges, those whose journeys have been marked by suffering, but who have emerged from those trials with a deeper understanding of themselves and of God's goodness. It is through their stories of overcoming that we see the power of God's redemptive work. It is through their stories of healing that we are reminded that nothing is beyond God's reach, that no life is too far gone to be restored. In much the same way, your story, however broken it may feel right now, is being rewritten by the author of life into a masterpiece of grace. You may not see it yet. You may still be in the midst of the struggle, feeling as though the pen is heavy in your hand, unsure of what to write next. But God is writing through you, and what he is creating will be a testimony to his faithfulness, his love, and his ability to redeem. There is power in a story that has been redeemed. It is a story that carries weight because it speaks of transformation. It speaks of a God who takes what is lost and makes it whole again, who brings beauty out of ashes and joy out of mourning. Your story, when redeemed, becomes a tool in God's hands to touch the lives of others, to encourage them in their own journeys of trust and transformation. And perhaps the most remarkable thing about a redeemed story is that it is not just for you, it is for others. Your struggles, your victories, your heartaches, your healing, they are not merely personal experiences. They are part of a larger narrative, a story that God is telling to the world. The work He is doing in your life will serve as a beacon of hope to others, as a reminder that God can do the impossible, that He can rewrite the endings of broken stories, that He is in the business of transformation. There is no such thing as a wasted life in God's eyes. Every pain, every failure, every disappointment has its place in the grand narrative He is writing. And when that story is redeemed, it is a story that becomes more than just a personal journey. It becomes a shared testimony of the goodness of God, a light shining in the darkness, a message of hope for a world that so desperately needs it. So, as you walk through the process of having your story rewritten, remember this: God does not waste a single moment. He is using every chapter to prepare you for the story that is coming. And when it is finished, you will see that every part of your life, every high, every low, every twist and turn, was leading you to a place of deeper faith, deeper understanding, and deeper love. Your redeemed story will be one worth telling, not just for you, but for all those who will find hope in it. As we come to the close of this journey, we are reminded that the story we find ourselves living is never quite as finished as it may appear. What we see as the end of one chapter is often the beginning of something much greater. In every moment of hardship, every stretch of uncertainty, every season of waiting, God is preparing us for a breakthrough, for a turning of the page, for the unfolding of a greater purpose. This moment, this very moment you are living, may seem like the hardest chapter of your story, but trust that this is not where the narrative ends. It is simply the soil in which God is planting the seeds of something new. The struggles and trials that seem to define your life today are not the full measure of who you are, nor are they the full measure of the story God is writing. What may feel like an ending is, in fact, the crucial turning point of a divine plot that you cannot yet see in its fullness. The author sees the whole story from beginning to end, and he knows how it will unfold. He knows that what you are walking through today will give rise to a beauty that cannot be fully understood in the moment. The wilderness you feel trapped in is not the conclusion of your life's tale. It is a necessary season in the process, one that shapes and refines you for the greatness that is to come. God's timing is always perfect, though it may never align with our own desires for speed or comfort. His plan is never random. Each step, even those that seem like delays, are parts of a grand orchestration that is leading you to your breakthrough. When you look back at the road you have traveled, you will see that every detour was a step toward the destiny He has planned for you. The broken places, the moments of silence, the pain you have carried, these are not the end of your story, but the very places where God is doing His deepest work. You are not abandoned. You are being prepared. Trust the process. The author of your life is never far from you. He is writing your story with perfect care, weaving every strand of your past, present, and future into a tapestry of redemption. His purpose for you is not only for your own good, but for the good of those around you. Your story, rewritten by the grace of God, will inspire, heal, and bring hope to those who are walking through their own wilderness, their own pain, their own uncertainty. The final chapter of your life has not yet been written. But know this: when it is, you will see that every moment, every decision, every trial, every triumph was part of a larger plan that only the author could have designed. And when the last page is turned, you will stand amazed at the beauty that emerges from the brokenness, the light that shines through the darkness, the victory that follows the struggle. You will know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that God did not waste a single moment. He was there in every chapter, guiding, redeeming, and preparing you for a story that is more than worth telling. So do not fear the process. Do not despair in the waiting. Do not be disheartened by the pain or the difficulty. Trust the author, for he is about to rewrite your story. Trust that in his hands the ending will be greater than anything you could have ever written for yourself. And when it is finally complete, you will know that every word, every page, every chapter was worth the journey. Your story will be one of redemption, one of hope, one of glory. Trust the process, for God is writing the most beautiful ending imaginable.